What's up, cinephiles? I'm Rod Richards, and today we're going to have a look at the 1966 film Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, directed by Mike Nichols. Alright, the first thing you'll notice when you watch Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is that the opening shot looks and feels like the ending of a movie. It's at night, there's a full moon, we see a couple leaving a party and slowly walking together through a quiet, leafy college campus with a mournful acoustic guitar melody in the background. However, instead of walking away from the camera, as one might expect at the end of a movie, they're walking toward the camera. We slowly see them make their way back to their own house. The woman turns on the light, and we see who they are. They are a married couple, George and Martha. George, played by Richard Burton, is a history professor at a liberal arts college, presumably somewhere in the northeastern US. Martha, played by Elizabeth Taylor, is his rather loudmouth wife. So this couple staggers home from the party, and normally they'd be going to bed, but Martha informs George that they have guests coming over. A handsome young biology professor, played by George Segal, and his wife, Honey, played by Sandy Dennis. These two couples are really the only characters in this film. And as the night progresses, this young couple becomes increasingly tangled in George and Martha's neurotic, manipulative web. And before the sun comes up the next morning, we're going to see what each of these people is made of, and it ain't pretty. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf truly is a deliciously nasty piece of cinema, and it's one of those films that you experience differently depending on what stage of life that you're in. Of course, all films are like this to some extent, but this one is particularly so. I've seen this film many times going back into my 20s, and I'm now about the age that George and Martha are in this film. So what strikes me when I watch it is how on earth anyone would stay in a relationship like this. I see this kind of thing all the time in the people I know. Not exactly the same form as we see here, but married couples who are unhappily married, they're nasty to and contemptuous of each other, but seem resigned to this state of affairs. And I also see a lot of married people who aren't openly hostile to each other, but who tolerate or don't even seem to notice disrespectful behavior from their partners. So why do people stay in these kinds of situations? Financial considerations, of course, account for a lot of it, but it's clear that in most cases, either consciously or unconsciously, it boils down to fear of something, either fear of losing money or, more accurately, the status that comes along with having money, or fear of being alone. And there is clearly some of both of these going on with the conjugal nightmare that is George and Martha. If marriage is an apple, then the fear of being alone and the fear of loss of status comprise the two-headed worm at its core. But fortunately for us, the form that these fears take in George and Martha produces something like a literary 10-car pileup on the freeway. It's so extraordinarily awful that we can't help holding up traffic while we stare at the carnage with morbid fascination. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the making of this film. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is based on the Edward Albee play of the same name, which was first staged in 1962. The director of this version, Mike Nichols, believe it or not, had no experience with filmmaking before this. He got his gig because he was a hugely successful theater director. And in the year or so before the film was made, he had something like 4 hit Broadway plays running at the same time. Though Mike Nichols lacked experience directing films, he really loved and understood Albee's play, and he used his popularity and what influence he had to make sure that this film version of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf remained as faithful as possible to Albee's material. Mike Nichols turned out to be one of those collaboration-oriented directors who focused less on imposing his own artistic vision on his films, but rather on creating the conditions in which actors could do their best work. You'll notice that the film is shot in black and white, and 1966 was around the inflection point of the film industry's shift to color photography for movies. And you would certainly expect a high-profile film like this to be made in color. The choice to shoot this in black and white was a deliberate decision made by Mike Nichols because he felt that the overall feel of black and white would convey the tone he wanted. And he had to search around for a cinematographer who was on board with this. He settled on Haskell Wexler, who was actually the cameraman on Coming Home, which we discussed in the last episode. All right, a little bit about Elizabeth Taylor. Her character of Martha was a really remarkable role for her to play. Now keep in mind that Elizabeth Taylor had been widely considered to be one of the most beautiful women in the world, and she was still only 32 years old when this film was made. So it says something about her that she would take on the role of Martha, who is a loud, frumpy, vulgar, middle-aged alcoholic woman whom we see scarfing down leftover chicken from the fridge in close-up. It's certainly nothing like the glamorous roles that audiences were accustomed to seeing her in. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf shocked a lot of people in 1966 with its frank discussion of adult situations and its coarse language. Words like bastard, son of a bitch, goddamn, up yours, etc. This kind of language had never before been heard on American screens. Okay, that's it for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. So get a couple of strong cocktails in you and spend an evening with George and Martha. If you don't feel better about your own life, then you've got some work to do. Thank you for watching. Until next time.